Good afternoon to everyone here in the room and everyone connecting from near and far. My name is Neej Gore. I'm Zeta's Chief Data Officer. I've been at Zeta for about 4.5 years. I came over with Chris Momberg, our CTO, who you heard from earlier today. And we have assembled an all-star panel today to talk about a very, very hot topic, and that is identity. Identity as it relates to marketing. So let's meet our guests. I'm going to start right here on stage. Chris?
Neej, thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone in the room. My name's Chris Casey. I look after worldwide business development for AWS Data Exchange, which is a service that helps customers exchange third-party data from one another, all natively on the cloud. I've been with AWS for about 3 years, and I'm super excited and honored to be invited to be on the panel today. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Chris. And Dennis, next.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. Thanks Neej for bringing me along. My name is Dennis Ellis. I am a VP of Product focusing on identity at LiveRamp. So I lead all of our identity initiatives across all of our R&D, really thinking about how data comes together to then how it shows up downstream when people are ready to use it for marketing activity.
Thank you so much, Dennis, and it's great to have you. And last but certainly not least, Allan.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Allan Samson. I'm the Senior Vice President for Marketing at T-Mobile, and I am on the pure customer acquisition, marketing, market share side of the business. So we use all the data and the tools that we're talking about and the information we're talking about today just to grow customers in a market that's 100% saturated. So every day, everyone has a phone. We're working every day to figure out how to get folks to move from one provider to another. And advancements in the space that we're talking about today are certainly key to helping us do that more efficiently.
Thanks, Allan. And again, this is a great panel because we have some vendor representation, but we also have enterprise customer representation. For all of the customers and prospects that are on the call today, some of the principles at the end will be summarized into best practices. But we want to start with how did we actually get here? How did we arrive in 2021 where an era that I'm calling the identity event horizon, where we've crossed the inflection point, and I think that the next generation of identity is going to create new category leaders and really create defensible moats around enterprises. I think there are really 3 contributing factors in terms of how we got here. The first was this boom in privacy regulations. So going back 3 or 4 years, obviously privacy is top of mind for everybody today. That was compounded by the deprecation of the third-party cookie. And last but not least, probably most importantly, consumer expectations have increased specifically through the pandemic. They're more fickle, and the consumer journey has become more fragmented. There's more technologies. The only thing that actually unifies the stack and the experience for the consumer is the concept of identity, and you have to get it right. So, identity is essentially moved from desired to required for the enterprise. It's also going to create, again, new category leaders, moats, and so forth. So I want to start off with a very basic question. This one's going to go to you, Dennis, and it's a big one. So I'm very curious to hear your answer. What is the one thing you think enterprises really need to start or stop as it relates to identity? And the reason I'm asking you first is you're a Zeta partner. You've been a partner of ours for many years. We work very closely together. I've known you for many years, and I think you have a very interesting perspective in this regard.
You just mean I'm controversial. I think I'm going to go with the stop, and it's a little bit of a start. It's a double-edged sword, and it's really stop thinking in silos, whether that's departments across your organization or its channels. The reality is that people show up in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different places, and that journey needs to be understood from start to finish. And that's really hard to do. And so on the start, it's really start thinking about a common framework that allows you to connect all of those touch points to a single person or a single concept of a person. And then start thinking about those channels as ways that we express ourselves or ways that we do show up, right? It's not that I show up differently on social than I do on display. It's that I'm potentially in a different context. I'm potentially in a different psychographic state, right? And so when it comes to the start-stop, it's stop thinking in terms of just destinations or enterprise identity. Start bringing that customer journey together and start thinking about that customer journey as a holistic entity. And then start really bringing together those touch points and thinking about how you message me in the right context at the right time.
Any do mores or do lesses as enterprises navigate this new territory?
test and iterate and test again. I mean, that's the product manager in me that will always say that for pretty much any question I'm asked. But, as we think about this, and this will kind of come to what I say later, like we're in a time of just rapid change, and that time isn't going away. We will be in a time of change for a very long time. And so, have a set of fundamentals, start testing, and don't ever stop testing.
Yep, absolutely. Chris, I'm going to move to you. Where does identity need to live in the organization at the enterprise level? And how does Amazon think about that?
Yeah, when we're talking to customers who view themselves as leaders in this space, a common thread that they label it is a foundational cloud-native building block that can be ubiquitously used across their enterprise to power various marketing strategies, e-commerce strategies, or even things like customer support. And foundational is probably the key word there. Identity is the central spine that really is the pillar that all of these different business units would need to build off to really execute some of these things and make more informed and faster decisions in today's world. You touched on it, but consumer expectations is continuing to evolve, where they're looking for personalized experiences that not only relate to what they're looking for from a product perspective, but even some of the history that they have with your brand. And that's just not possible if data is fragmented across your organization, and identity data specifically is fragmented across your organization, or even other external platforms.
Yep.
External platforms are still going to play a role in terms of actually activating marketing campaigns, but from an enterprise perspective, if they can't have an understanding of their customer base and linking their various identity data sets together, so they can actually create audiences themselves in some cases, really they're going to lag behind some of those market leaders.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm sure Amazon has big plans in the identity space, many of which probably can't be discussed on stage today, but any hints?
Yeah, we're super excited to be continuing to partner with companies like Zeta to really service our mutual customers here. I think what we are trying to help these customers with is whether that's through analytics and tools that they can use, like things like Amazon SageMaker or Personalize, those things that are actively being used by enterprises today to power some of those analytics. But we're certainly excited to continue to innovate on some of the foundational building blocks that will help an enterprise really build that common layer of understanding, tying some of their marketing activation activities to the consumers, all the way down to the personally identifiable information level. Yep. If they need to.
And we're very excited to partner with you on this as well. I'm going to move to Allan, and the question I have, and I'm going to read a quote first. The section here today is titled Navigating the Golden Age of Identity. So what is the golden age? And the quote I have here is, it's the period when a specific art, skill, or activity is at its peak. We've crossed the inflection point. We're moving to a new area for identity for the enterprise. Allan, my question is, what are some of the challenges that you see at T-Mobile, and what are some of the opportunities that have come up?
Yeah, I think the golden age of what's available, I would agree with that. The golden age in terms of our ability to harness it to its max commercial outcome, I think we're not quite there, at least T-Mobile isn't. But from a challenge perspective, T-Mobile has historically been an acquisition machine and a marketing machine. And so we have a whole infrastructure that was built on more third-party and first-party data and mass outcomes. So you buy cohorts, or you assemble an algorithm that says millions of people look like this and we're going to give them a single treatment. We might have 20 different treatments, but still you're taking people and putting them in those chunks. As identity gets more important and get more personalized, the good news is we're getting a flow of zero-party data and a lot more information that years ago we would love to have had, but it challenges all of the models that we have. And so when do you overlay something built in a different era with this new information? And a really good example is on the B2B side, where it's not an individual buyer, it's a company, and there's a buying committee and an influencing committee, and your historical data says these are the folks to reach out to, and these are their titles, and these are the interests that they have. But then there's a form fill and a zero-party data that comes in that is in conflict with that. Different phone number, different title, different existing solution set. When do you overwrite one with the other? And so we're just in the early stages of kind of decomposing all of that and writing our algorithms on which takes the priority. And Dennis, I love what you said. So much of that is a guess, and then we test. and then this turns out a little bit better, and we kind of repeat. But I think the golden age is we've never had richer data, and we're just not quite there in terms of the best and highest use of that data for the commercial outcome we're looking for.
I expect T-Mobile will continue to be a category leader through this phase. Very, very progressive initiatives happening there. And you mentioned zero-party data. It's very interesting. We're big believers at Zeta in cultivating the consumer relationship through better zero-party data, having that relationship with your consumer, but having there be a real value exchange that backs that up. You want to collect more information, but the consumer should get a better experience. That data needs to live somewhere. So back to you, Dennis. My question is really around the role of the CDP. How do you see it? How does LiveRamp see it? Obviously, Zeta has a CDP that we're very proud of that we launched this last year that's gotten good momentum. What is your perspective on how the CDP fits into the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it kind of goes back to some of what Chris was talking about in where does identity live inside of an organization? I think CDPs are really transforming the way that, in the data lifecycle, if we think of kind of ingestion and match generation, we then think of analytics, and then we think of activation. And that just kind of is a cycle that runs over and over and over again. CDPs are really revolutionizing those first two steps, right? How do I get the data I need? And then how do I do the types of analytics I need? And I think one of the challenges that I've seen is CDPs living in a silo and not having access to all of the data that it needs to kind of be at its best self. And then the other piece of that is the identity side, is how does identity come to bear? I think a lot of CDPs do a good job of match generation for, first party data, zero party data coming in. If I have an email address that matches another email address, I can link that together. Mm-hmm. But so much of identity is way deeper and under the hood of, what are the data elements that actually come together to represent a person? How do I get that if I've got a phone number over here and an email address over here?
And the confidence intervals associated to those data elements as well.
Exactly.
Very important.
Yeah, that's right. And so then I think that next evolution is really the CDP plus identity partnership, where it comes together, and we're able to do rich, what we call portraits, some might call profiles in the ecosystem generation, and we understand, okay, what data maps to an individual or a customer, and then how do I build kind of more data and more understanding of that customer throughout the data journey.
100%. And obviously, Zeta has taken a strong position on CDP. We think the notion of identity and CDP needs to live in all of your marketing applications. We're going to come back to that. But before we move away from the notion of data enrichment, zero-party data, my question is to you, Chris. The role of third-party data in this modern ecosystem, what is the role of third-party data, and how should businesses think about incorporating that? I know Amazon has a data store. How do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really nice evolution and segue on what both Allan and Dennis were saying. If you have that ability to create that common identifier and understand your customer across your internal data sets, how you can then increase and maximize that value, and Allan was referring to some of the things T-Mobile are doing, is supplementing that with new insights that might have previously been considered third-party data. You being able to ingest those natively into your cloud data environments to be able to link those together and generate new insights, whether that's from previous purchasing, offline purchasing patterns, or different demographics data to get more specific information on your consumers or potential consumers. That's really where we're seeing the next wave of evolution from our customers. And from a AWS Data Exchange perspective, that's one of the key value propositions we're trying to drive for customers in this space. What's the third-party data sets that they can use internally to power and inform some of these marketing activation campaigns that they're really trying to use to disrupt, in certain industries, or reach a brand new customer base, or more efficiently, reach a customer base that they already have. 100%.
We're very proud of our data cloud here at Zeta. I'm biased, obviously, as I run the data cloud here and I'm the chief data officer. At our IPO in June, we had this big banner outside of New York Stock Exchange that said data plus AI equals intent. And in this modern economy where you're fighting for consumer intention, if you can predict intent better than your competitors, you stand to win. I think, Allan, T-Mobile is a great example. I'd love to hear how you've incorporated third-party data, if you're familiar with the strategies there, or anything that you can share that enterprises might be able to benefit from here.
Well, I really appreciate what Chris said. I mean, the fact of the matter is, a company like T-Mobile, we're going to acquire 1 million customers a quarter. And so there's a scale to our business that while zero party and first party in some sense is more direct and attributable, it doesn't necessarily, or yet hasn't reached the point that it's got enough of the scale to it that we can say, okay, with this alone, we're going to go out and get 1 million customers every quarter. And so the third party data, and I know that's changing, the intent signals that we purchase and the various feeds that we get provide that scale and allow us to make these test decisions in a daily, weekly basis where it might take time to get enough zero and first party stuff. And so really marrying that together, I completely agree with Chris. I think it's not one or the other, but it's finding the right algorithm and the right hierarchy to all of this massive amount of data. Has so much to be found. But then you got to decide which one takes the precedence. And that's what we're constantly working on. And the answer is it really does vary. For our consumer business, that looks a lot more, continues to be heavily weighted on some of the stuff that Chris is talking about, the third party, the intent stuff, and we're refining it with first party. But then on the B2B space, I would almost flip that around and say we get roughly several tens of thousands of zero and first party interactions through our content syndication, all that kind of stuff that we do in a B2B space that has proven to be much more actionable and give you a higher conversion rate, if you will. So we're in the throes of sorting that all out, setting up and making sure we've got the right sequencing to that. And my hunch is, my fear and my excitement at the same time is that every quarter that's going to change. I think the space is changing so quick. As soon as you lock it all in, you want to plan your next 5 quarters, I suspect we'll be revisiting it every couple of quarters, talking to folks like LiveRamp and you all to make sure we're not getting too comfortable with whatever yesterday's algorithm was.
We call that continuous optimization here, but that's exactly right. You need to be evolving, and the machine learning needs to be picking up on that. We worked with a ride-sharing company, I won't name the company, for driver acquisition historically. And we found that a leading indicator that determined if someone was interested in becoming a new driver was the fact that they were purchasing sleepwear. It was the weirdest latent signal I've ever seen, almost unexplainable, but it factored so heavily as a feature in the model that ended up going live for that customer. So, being able to look at the data, being able to analyze it, refactor it again and again in an automated way is very important. One more question, and then we're going to move to some best practices. This one goes to you again, Dennis. The role of the clean room, right? The clean room is now a big topic of conversation. We've announced our clean room initiative this morning. Many enterprises are coming to us and asking us if we have a clean room. Where do you think it fits into the ecosystem, Dennis? Oh, I think Dennis may have frozen on us.
He's deep in thought on that question.
Yeah, he's deep in thought. Maybe I'll redirect to you, Chris.
Yeah, I think clean rooms are an important part of the ecosystem because not all use cases are okay, or companies are not necessarily leaning into, well, we want to actually exchange the underlying data, but the insights from it are super important. And so, in terms of how it can add to the value proposition that Allan was also talking about here, the most important outcome is the unique insights that you can get. And if in certain cases the actual transfer of the underlying data is not regulatorily compliant, or it's just not part of the business proposition, it's a real shame at the moment, pre-clean rooms, that we still couldn't get those insights and get that innovation. And so that's what we're hearing from customers, why that clean room topic and the value proposition, it is so impactful.
It's very much an input rather than an output, right? It's a way to enrich in a privacy compliant manner. It's almost like a utility that has to be part of your marketing infrastructure, and you can use it when you need it. That's the way we thought about it too. Let's bring up the best practices.
Hey,
Dennis,
Neej, I just want to say I'm
yeah,
back.
please add. Yes, you're back. Thank you. Yeah, no worries.
My internet froze.
We're glad to have you back. Any thoughts on the clean room before you move forward?
No, generally I agree. I mean, I think the piece to think about there, I mean, what an explosion, right? 5 years ago when we were first concepting what became Safe Haven at LiveRamp, clean room wasn't really even a word that was used, and now we're here, right? And I think the big piece that I would say is underlying any sort of clean room is the topic that we're having here. It's identity. And how does that map into that clean room? How does it map back out of that clean room? And how do you use it across your stack? Like a clean room in a silo, to Chris's point, can't be an input. It is a function of its own kind of purpose, and it has to be fully featured, which we just don't see very much today. So it's really thinking about that end-to-end data journey and really what's that underlying identity framework that connects it.
Totally. I think in many ways, LiveRamp Safe Haven was the original clean room for the entire marketing industry, and I'm sure it'll have a big presence moving forward as well. We're going to move to a couple best practices to summarize some of the things we've shared today, and then we're going to come back to the panelists for one prediction about the future. So we can click forward. I guess I will click forward. So the first one that was reiterated multiple times was the notion of orbiting around identity. So your applications, your infrastructure, your data, it all needs to orbit around the notion of shared identity. This gives you low latency. This gives you high resolution. Chris Momberg talked about that this morning in the way we think about our product stack, but this is a very important thing for every enterprise to keep in mind. Number two, flexing your graph. So your consumers are expressing their identity in so many different ways. Your graph needs to account for all of those ways. You're not going to get identifiers and identity from your consumers in a systematic way all the time. So your graph really needs to support more flexible inputs and more flexible outputs. Number three, always be curious. There's going to be a big role for zero-party data in the future, but you need to actually use it to improve your value proposition with your end consumer. That's the real takeaway. If they're going to be providing you with shared information, you need to make their experience better as part of that process. Number four, sharpen your personalization. This is so core to what we do at Zeta, but the idea is that you can use clean rooms and technologies and utilities like that to enrich your data, to make your understanding of your consumers smarter. And number five, we very much here believe in deterministic identity and deterministic measurement to make sure your campaigns and programs are performing. If you have identity incorporated into your measurement stack, it gives you leverage over any of your competitors that don't, that are using probabilistic models. So this is a very key differentiator, and again, this is how you can essentially win in this new golden age. So let's get one prediction from every panelist. I will start with you, Chris, since you're on stage with me.
I think I'd go back to what I said right at the start about identity being treated as a foundational building block, a cloud-native foundational building block that can be used ubiquitously across the enterprise. Allan touched on it. Depending on the use case, depending on each individual team's objectives, they might need to flex how they're thinking about using the data and different services they might use to achieve their outcome, e.g. do they need a clean room for this specific outcome or not? And so thinking about it as a core foundational building block across your enterprise that then you can allow your teams and unlock innovation from those teams is a real critical component that I think you're going to see a clear delineation between organizations that prioritize that and the ones that don't.
Absolutely. Dennis.
Yeah, I think it dovetails really nicely. It goes back to what I said. I think outside of your walls, change is the only constant for the foreseeable future. And preparing for change is preparing a foundation. It's preparing a solid place from which you can do a lot of test and iteration, and you can explore and you can adapt, right? I mean, I think, we see with GDPR is a really good example of a type of change that comes in, but it's not a moment in time change. It's not, oh, we've made the change and it's forever. It's interpretation and redesign and redeploy, and being ready for that requires a consistent thread of identity throughout everything you do in your enterprise.
That's great. I 100% agree with that. Allan.
I'll go, Chris, I think you touched on this. I'm going to go to a bolder place, and maybe it's just T-Mobile's DNA of being the customer champion, but I believe identity can become a value prop attribute. We take our inspiration from Nordstrom's or Ritz-Carlton that when you go there and they take everything they know about you to enhance your experience, you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I talked about a cruise and now I'm being bombarded with cruise ads, but you feel rather like I welcome the experience because they know so much about me that I'm gonna have this tremendous experience. And we think you can bring that down to the mass market a little bit, and that we can take identity and preference management and customer election around that, and not only make it just a do you want us to email you or not, but let us learn. And in the smartphone business, the way Google, you start your day by an app or an AI that kind of says, here are things that are coming up. Is it helpful if I pull this file? You've got a trip coming over here. So we're thinking about it as and it's not a this year thing, but it's in 3 years, could we see part of the experience of being with T-Mobile is that there's this helpful use of identity, and sales and revenue flows from that, but in a less overt way. It's not just bombarding you with banner ads, but making every day you kind of want to check in with our brand, and your preferences manifest themselves in an experience and purchases and decisions that are revenue accretive. So we're trying to step all the way back to this could be a value prop, not just a clever marketing a toy. So that's my bold prediction.
100%. And I'm going to go a little bit bolder than the three of you, and a little bit further out into the future. Yesterday at one of our panels, we discussed the first flight to man landing on the moon was about 66 years. So in that spirit, as I look out maybe more than 5 or 10 years, I think identity in the metaverse is going to, again, reshape the entire marketing ecosystem. Because in the metaverse, you're transacting using typically NFTs or crypto. That's an identity-less transaction. So it's going to be a very important part of enterprise businesses in the future, and I think we'll see another very big opportunity when that era sets upon us. So with that, I want to thank all the panelists for joining. Great insight, great feedback. I really enjoyed having you, and next year we can all come back and talk about the metaverse more.